Let's talk now about that reelection. This is an interesting story that I want to be careful about because when I talk about this, I don't want to inadvertently make anybody think that maybe they don't need to go out and vote in November. Everybody needs to go out and vote in November, but it's an interesting story nonetheless. Donald Trump is the most unpopular president as of January 1 of their reelection year to seek reelection, dating back all the way 44 years to Gerald Ford seeking reelection in 1976. And Donald Trump still might win despite that. According to 538, on January 1st, just a few days ago, Donald Trump's approval rating was 42.6%. This might now be lower because of the Iran stuff, or it might be higher. We don't really know. But that was the number as of January 1st. Only Gerald Ford had a lower approval rating on January 1 of an election year, a re-election year, who was polling 39.3% on January 1st of 1976. Now, my memory, when I was starting to research this yesterday, was that George W. Bush was very unpopular when running for re-election. And indeed, he was at 48.9% approval, but that was higher than Barack Obama at 45.7%. Barack Obama winning re-election very easily in 2012. So there's a few important messages here. The most important one is if George W. Bush was reelected with a 48.9% approval on January 1 of his reelection year, if Barack Obama was reelected with 45.7% approval on January 1 of his reelection year, Trump can be reelected at 42.6%, especially in this hyper-partisan environment where Trump is likely to lose the popular vote because of big deficits in large blue states like California and New York, but to eke out wins in those few key states that handed him the Electoral College victory in 2016. So when you see this, it's interesting. We don't know how Trump's approval will move between now and Election Day. It means nothing about whether we need to get out and vote. The answer is yes, we do. The other thing to remember is that November approval need not be anything like January 1st approval. And in fact, if you look at the last 11 presidents who ran for re-election, of the 11, 6 saw their approval go down between January 1st and the election. 5 saw their approval go up between January 1st and the election. So for Trump, this means to get out of the danger zone, he needs to try to get his approval closer to 50%. For us, this means assume nothing, vote, work every state, consider no state safe. I mean, we know California, Massachusetts, New York, we know that they're going blue, but work the election, work every state. Trump was one of the most disliked and unpopular candidates that ran, right? I mean, remember, before he was elected, he was extremely unpopular within the Republican primary, and he still won. We are fighting some of the most malignantly ignorant people in the country to try to remove this guy. Incumbency is a powerful thing. We need to fight it on all fronts. Public activism, get out the vote. We've got to be fighting voter suppression. That is happening in many states, and we are trying to fight it in many of those states. Fight gerrymandering, fight the foreign influence, which is, of course, going to be an issue once again. And to put sort of like a final point on this, despite Gerald Ford's approval rating of only 39% back in 1976, he lost the popular vote by only 1.5 million votes. That's about half of the margin that Trump lost by in 2016. Put another way, as unpopular as Gerald Ford was in 1976, Trump lost the popular vote by twice as much in 2016 and still won the Electoral College. So the takeaway is don't do anything that would be influenced by thinking that it's in the bag. I still believe that it is more than plausible that Donald Trump gets himself reelected. Sometimes people, you know, let's actually address that because we are going to have a long election cycle here of this. I've said many times, I am against Donald Trump. I think there's a great chance that Donald Trump is defeated, but I think it's perfectly plausible. And in some cases, if certain things go a certain way, even likely that Donald Trump gets himself reelected. And when I say that, I'll get emails from people in the audience who say, David, you're being really demoralizing by saying you think Donald Trump could get reelected. I'm being realistic with you. And if anything, when you hear me say that, it shouldn't demoralize you. It should make you commit to voting and to getting out the vote. The idea that stating that the president could realistically get himself reelected is demoralizing is the absolute wrong interpretation. The interpretation should be half the country doesn't vote. Let's go out and get people voting so that we can win this thing. Let's go to a break. Afterwards, CNBC put up the wrong pictures of Andrew Yang and Tulsi Gabbard in a recent segment. I want to talk with you about whether it is ignorance or malice. And we will, of course, raise Hanlon's razor, always a great quote when we talk about ignorance versus malice. Your voicemails and many other things coming up.